Okay, with the next chapter on the horizon and speculation season starting up again, I wanted to ask you a question. Do you think licenses hurt the overall creativity of Dead by Daylight? While they're clearly good for the devs' wallets, for the players still playing the game, some design decisions based around those licenses don't always mean a better game experience.
Space Coconut.
The Halloween DLC was the first licensed chapter for the game, and with it came Michael Myers, one of the most well-loved of the killers due to his varied playstyles enabled by the Scratched Mirror add-on. We got the Haddonfield map, a very well-balanced map that both killers and survivors enjoy playing on, and the Laurie Strode Survivor skin with her 3 perks including Decisive Strike. The next DLC was for A Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy Krueger was released and was nerfed about a week later due to survivor outcry, if I remember right. He then remained at the very bottom of every tier list for about a year until he received a complete rework. He recently received more changes and an add-on pass a while ago, but I'm not quite sure how they've impacted his performance. With him, we got the Badham map, which was later revamped to include several variations of the same map. Something I wish that they would have done with other maps. The Saw chapter brought the pig, the Detective Tap skin, and the game map. The pig, depending on who you ask, is fine or bad, and Tap's perk, Detective's Hunch, has become more popular as a totem killer over time. The game map is well loved by the community, especially after its visual rework. Its recent increase in availability for Saw Week was very well received due to how well designed and balanced the map is. Like Haddonfield, killers and survivors both love playing on this map. Stranger Things was next, bringing the Demogorgon and 2 survivor skins, Nancy and Steve, along with the Underground Complex map. Demogorgon is a well-loved killer in the game that has received tweaks to his power like other killers, but we'll talk more about him later. Both survivor sets of perks brought game-changing effects to the game that shook up the meta for the better. The map, again an indoor map, was lauded for its balance and design. The Silent Hill chapter was one of the biggest and most exciting licenses that the game had obtained. Pyramid Head improved on the chase mechanics that the devs developed for Demogorgon by changing it from a pounce to a damaging Doctor Shock attack with a different animation. To spice things up, they added exciting cage mechanics along with the ability to moray survivors without an offering or a perk. I was very happy to see these new and exciting mechanics appear and become available for other killers as well. The Cheryl skin also brought game-changing perks that shifted the meta away from the norm. And as usual, the Midwich School map, like the others before it, is a well-loved indoor map by survivors and killers. The most recent release was the Resident Evil chapter, which brought the Nemesis, Jill, and Leon, and the Raccoon City Police Department map. Nemesis once again built upon the chase mechanics of Demogorgon and Pyramid Head by changing it to a tentacle whip from a pounce or a ground beam, and spicing it up with zombies. The survivor skins came with perks that once again changed the meta in a way that made gameplay more fun and engaging for both sides. While the map was once again a flawless masterpiece in dev ingenuity loved by the entire Dead by Daylight community, the paragraphs were just as exciting. Leatherface was a well-engineered killer at release who functioned very differently than the hillbilly who was actually based on Leatherface in the first place. While some players found Ghostface to be a Myers clone, many more pointed out that he was completely different since he was the first killer that could efficiently teabag survivors. The Bill skin brought Unbreakable and Borrowed Time, both of which still have a place in the wildly varied survivor meta of today. The Ash skin brought more perks that changed the meta and was the first survivor to have actual voice lines. Ignoring all of the sarcasm before, in case you missed it, did you notice a pattern? While it's important to stay true to the source material of a license, it would seem that the devs are so good at copying other people's work that they forget who's grading it. They focus on how a map looks compared to the original and making sure that they throw in locations from the original so players can feel like their purchase was worth it, but forget what it feels like to navigate the map during a chase while looking for survivors or looking for generators. In the case of the police station, they forget to think about how long it takes a killer to move from one side of the map to the other, and how quickly survivors can do gens if they're on the opposite side. The maps from different licensed DLCs are not exactly choice locations to play a match of Dead by Daylight. Haddonfield, the game, Midwich, the Underground Complex, and the police station are all maps that players would get rid of entirely or opt out of if they could. Take the recent double game map availability announcement as an example. The Badham Preschool is interesting because it's the only map in the entire game that has different variations of the same map. But the overall consensus might be that the school landmark is ill-balanced. But as a hag main, the map is one of my favorites to play on, and the school is pretty broken if you catch the minute. Let me know what you think about Badham in the comments below. Unbreakable, Decisive Strike, Franklin's Demise, and Barbecue and Chili might be the most useful perks out of all of the licensed DLC perks, and the rest are DLC-flavored rehashes of other perks. Then, the killers themselves are essentially killer clones with different gimmicks. Ghostface is a Myers that can crouch, Leatherface and Hillbilly are basically the same killer except one goes straight and the other goes side to side. Demogorgon, Pyramid Head, and Nemesis all have powers that are utilized during a chase to hit survivors at pallets and vaults, while each has a different gimmick to make them unique aside from that. Demo Portals, Pyramid Head's cage, and Nemesis' zombies. This is a recent trend in killer design that is making the survivor community as a whole cry boring and hold W. Freddy and the Pig might be the most unique of all the killers, but people who main them will have a better idea of their flaws than I do. The original content put out by the devs today, compared to years ago, have quite a stark difference in quality, especially when it comes to map design. It's pretty well agreed upon that the Coal Tower is one of, if not the best balanced map in the game, which also happens to be an original map from the game's release. My point in all of this is to point out that the devs seem to lean more and more on other licenses to make their game more profitable. They sacrifice the good of the game and their own creativity to copy other people's work. Players will clap and cheer about Dead by Daylight reaching 100,000 players on Steam, but forget to mention that it's not because Dead by Daylight is a great game, but because Resident Evil was. We can take a look at the DLC from a Dead by Daylight gameplay perspective and see that it's not exactly Behavior's best work. Nemesis is a derivative of past licensed killers, and the Resident Evil map is simply awful for Dead by Daylight gameplay because the devs wanted players to play Resident Evil instead of Dead by Daylight. There's really no other explanation for that map, and we can clearly see the result of that mindset. Imagine what the Dead by Daylight Twitter would look like if the RPD map was doubled like the game map is, to allow players to play the map that they missed out on for a month after its release. How excited would you be to play the RPD map 4 or 5 times in a row? The survivor skins and their perks are kind of negligible in my opinion, because survivors don't use them as often and prefer to stick with the established meta. Now, the next killer is said to be another licensed killer, and there's nothing wrong with being excited to find out who it is. But I'm really hoping that through their excitement to be working on somebody else's license for their game, they take a step back and learn from their mistakes of past licensed DLCs, especially Resident Evil. Hopefully they keep the feel of the license, but design it to fit Dead by Daylight from a gameplay perspective. This was much longer than I thought it would be, but I appreciate you for making it this far. Let me know what you think of this thought, and let me know your guess for the next killer in the comments below. For fun, why don't you include how good or bad you think the chapter will be? And when the PTB comes out, I'll see if I can't go through the comments to share the ones that were right. Until then, I'm Space Coconut, and you're welcome.